Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Flash. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we have the return of one Wally West, which is pretty dope. I even love Barry being like, you have to come and make it an entrance, don't you? He, zipping into town because I love they're like, don't worry, Barry's on it. I'm on top of what? And it's like, wait, if you're not here, it's like Wally like making multiple versions of himself to kind of dismantle the plane bit by bit, and it's like, just coming in showing off. And then the fact is he's showing some new tricks that he's learned, like he's using his electricity to form a lotus in his hand and stuff like that. I'm like, and even Barry's like, you gotta teach me that. It's like, it's so interesting that the student has now become the teacher, or rather the master, which is interesting because let's not forget, literally last season Barry was teaching Nora kind of like the basics of being a speedster, all that he's kind of learned, and just to find out that Wally, who was his trainee at one point in time, has surpassed him. I mean, to be fair, they kind of set that up ahead of time, because I think in the grand scheme of things, I think like comic book wise, Wally is faster than Barry. That was already something they introduced in season 3. That was the whole point, to get Wally to be the one to save Iris from Savitar, because Wally was faster. He had a potential to go faster than Barry. So I think that was kind of an element to showing you that the fact is Wally has larger capabilities than potentially Barry, but still, obviously, Barry, isn't, done growing. I still think there's more for him to kind of potentially achieve later on down the line, but it was just kind of interesting. And at the same time, you have Cisco returning, which he's bringing up the whole point of Atlantis. So I'm like, okay, so, we know Themyscira exists in this continuity, well, it already existed in this continuity already. We just, because they visited, and when it's season 3 of Legends, I want to say, because that's where Zari dropped Helen of Troy off at. So obviously that exists, but probably, that must mean that, Atlantis only exists because of Crisis, post-Crisis, Earth Prime. So that's probably pretty dope. So we'll probably never tackle it, but that means there's a Wonder Woman that exists in this continuity potentially. There's an Aquaman that exists in this continuity potentially, because part of my brain was like, could this be them insinuating the DCEU? But it's like, no, because Barry wouldn't be the Flash. Ezra would be the Flash in that continuity. So, once again, that's going to be a thing of when they spread. You could almost make it, it's a whole complicated thing when you think about it too much, but it was just kind of an interesting detail about, But in this episode, they're dealing with a new meta that's come to town. Her name, I love that it's like, Cisco's like Turtle 2. And Barry's like, I was kind of waiting for something different. He's like, nope. Sometimes it's simple and to the point, basically, because they've crossed paths with Turtle in the past, but now they've come across Turtle too. Basically, she's going after these people who had testified against her. She got, I think, kicked out of the country, and she was in prison for a while, but now she's back for revenge. Her thing kind of works similar to Turtle, that she can kind of slow down time, and basically she can trap people in these time bubbles and basically rapidly age them and kill them. So, but there's a hitch with all of this, because Barry and Wally aren't in the best condition, because there's powers aren't because when him and Barry and Wally are about to clean up, they're doing super speed stuff, and then Barry kind of stops because a sharp pain hits him, and it's and then they start running through later on, it's there's been instances of it, Barry starts running through it hasn't been frequently, but little by little, there's been instances of your powers are a little haywire, aren't they? But I never took notice of it. I never thought too much of it, because the only time we really saw it was the first episode after Crisis, when he was with Diggle. They showed it the electricity in his hand was kind of messed up, and it's what was that about? But because Wally ends up talking about the fact that he has a different relationship with the Speed Force than Barry does, because Barry, anytime he ever goes to the Speed Force, is usually because the Speed Force brings him there, so his body kind of travels there. Well, he has to, whereas Wally can basically transport his mind to the Speed Force. So him and the Speed Force talk in a way of it's more of a voice for him, whereas the Speed Force, when it talks to Barry, manifests itself as his mom, which I think is kind of interesting. It doesn't, obviously it's always manifested itself as different people for Barry. But the fact is that it more often than not will choose to take the form of his mom. I think kind of speaks volumes. We'll get to that soon enough. But basically later on, he didn't know, because Barry hadn't talked about it. And I was because even I was trying to remember, when's the last time you did interact with the Speed Force? But then Iris was something went down between him and the Speed Force a little while back. And Wally ends up confronting Barry about it. And I'm Oh, because I completely forgot about the Ramsey situation. I was like, oh my god, I completely let that slip my mind, because like we know during Crisis he didn't interact with the Speed Force. He used it, but he didn't interact with it. So I was like, right. I was like, oh, and so they go inside the Speed Force, and then it's like there's lightning all around, but the Speed Force is dying. And basically it's saying because of Barry, and Barry's like, oh no, like it's because of me. I wasn't myself. But Wally starts getting pissed at him. It's like, it's your fault, Barry. The fact of the matter is you didn't come to me. What did you do? You do what you always do. You handle things on your own. You should have come to me, but you thought, I mean, to be fair, in his defense, Barry was dealing with a lot at the time. Like, the fact of the matter is he was literally told that he had to be the one to stop a Crisis. So he was in crisis mode at the time. He was also believed that he'd have to die to save everything, not just this world, every world from Crisis, So that's a complicated thing, but it's just because Barry, it's like, because the reason why he didn't talk to anyone about what he did to the Speed Force is because he felt, I think, ashamed of, like, because he let Ramsey get to him. And I think he just felt so ashamed. So that's why he hadn't really talked to Speed Force. In his mind, it's like, because you don't really, like, the Speed Force comes to him. He doesn't always seek her out. She seeks him out. And so it's a situation of I think because of that, he was just scared because it would mean confronting what he did. And he blamed himself. And now Wally's blaming him. And the thing is, Barry, Joe kind of talks to Wally about that later on. It's like, you don't do that. It's like, Barry, the fact of the matter is, you know how Barry is. He'll take this kind of upon himself. And, even like, because, Wally is a lot more zen now. But for him, it's just kind of like, this is all happening because of Barry. But he realizes, like, yeah, I shouldn't have kind of gotten so mad at, Barry. It's not very zen of me. And it's like, because the fact is that, Joe kind of reminds him, it's like, yeah, you're going through this because you're worried about, what this means in the grand scheme of things. But don't forget, Barry is going through this. So you're not going through this alone. Barry's also going through this, which Barry, goes inside the Speed Force to talk to the Speed Force. And then it becomes clear what happened. It's because of Crisis. When he let the Spectres, like when he got Oliver to unlock his full potential, and like, I love that because they make a point of it, and it's just like, and bam, I've unlocked your full potential. Oh, really? That was all it took? You touching my forehead? Yep. And there was no like spectacle to it or anything like that. And it's so interesting to think that one moment that had no spectacle to it, had massive ramifications. Basically, that energy surged through the Speed Force, and the Speed Force tried to contain it, but it couldn't, and it broke free, and it's killing the Speed Force. And Barry's kind of apologizing because he's like, this is my fault. Like, if I'd known what was going to happen, I would. But for, the Speed Force, it doesn't blame Barry. It's like, you did what you needed to do because of what you did, you were able to save the universe. Like, you were able to, deal with Crisis because of it. So there's no fault on you. You did what you had to do, but it still doesn't make Barry feel any better because, like, the Speed Force is dying. Especially doesn't help when the Speed Force looks like your mom. But that's the point. I think it's like, the Speed Force is like my boy. I don't think it was just talking at Barry, like, from the perspective of like, oh, like, it's like, I think it actually kind of thinks of Barry as its, child to a certain extent. I mean, think about it. Like, this, like, Barry is like one of the only people the Speed Force ever necessarily manifests itself like, because what did Wally say? He said, like, oh, the fact of the matter is it gets, it's comes to him as a voice, but beyond that, like, Barry's the only one we've ever seen consistently meet face to face with the Speed Force, and I think for him, I think it's just like because it's like, oh, you were actually like, you were my best choice essentially. I'm so glad to have, like, you were just one. Basically, like, having chosen Barry was one of the best decisions it made. Is kind of what the Speed Force was saying, because I think it does kind of. I think it does because it sees what Barry is capable of, what his future holds for him as a hero. It saw that spark all those years ago. And now I think it's, I don't know, like, it does kind of think of him as her son, saying my boy and everything. And I just thought that was interesting, which I'm sure that hurts even more for Barry, because he even talks about later on, it's like he lost his mom. It's like she died in front of him yet again, So there was that whole situation. And obviously, Wally comes to Barry about it, and, he's like, you were right, it was my fault. But Wally's like, if I were in your situation, you did what you had to do, and if I were in your situation, I would have done the same thing if it meant saving everyone. The fact of the matter is, we can't make up for the mistakes. Like, what we've done, like, there's no reversing that. All we can basically do is go forward and basically, try and do better going forward, essentially. despite whatever hurdles might be in our way that we can kind of conquer. And it's like, oh, did you learn that from? And he was like, no, I learned that from you. Because he had told this story about the fact is that there was this person who had lost their child and went to Buddha, and Buddha was like, oh, I can bring this child back, but you have to kind of go get a seed from everyone, talk to everyone, but get a seed from someone who's never lost a child. And this woman talked to all these different people. Everyone lost a child as well. The point was that Buddha was trying to teach her, like, despite what you're going through, the pain you're going through, you're not alone in it. That there are other people who have gone through this suffering as well. And that's what made Wally go like, yeah, I kind of lost sight of the fact is it's not just me going through pain because of this whole, Speed Force situation. It's you, because for them it's a situation of not only they're losing what is essentially ties to their powers, but luckily Cisco had been working on a means of counteracting Turtle 2's powers and everything, and so they end up using like the injection. They basically show up. They're basically because, and it's so interesting because they don't no longer have the Speed Force. There's no like infinite amount of energy flowing into them for their speed. So basically they're like, they have a limit. Like once they use it up, there's no going back because there's nothing else to pull their powers from. The Speed Force is the time. It's kind of impressive. It didn't all just disappear in general, but it's almost like basically coursing through their veins is like a reserve of energy, whatever is kind of left for them by the Speed Force. So it's like, once they burn through that reserve, that's it. So they kind of going, not just in this episode, but going forward in general, they have to reserve their powers because it's the only way to make sure that they last longer. So like to get to the CCPD, they ended up like dashing across town, but they had to like phase through the buildings because taking any other routes would mean burning through more of their energy. And so I like when they end up fighting Turtle 2 and she's blasting all those time orbs and they're literally running, and I just love speedster stuff, them like running on the side of the wall, everything being slow, the bubbles the time bubbles essentially coming after them. They ended up dodging all of them except for like Wally, who ended up getting caught by one, but Barry kind of slid underneath another one. But luckily Joe ended up injecting her, so they ended up winning the day. But it's still it's like, yeah, they were able to stop her, but it's still a situation of they have so little of their power left. Which there's a lot of interesting things about this. For one, well, Wally, the fact of the matter is he's kind of trying to get used to handling things without his powers. He ends up leaving town because he's got to do a lot, do a lot more good out there in the world, but he's gonna have to get used to not relying on his powers to do, like, try and see what kind of good he can do without his powers, because eventually one day they'll disappear. So he's kind of got to get used to it now. At the same time, Barry's talking to Iris about everything, but Iris is like, oh, maybe it's a blessing. And even I'm like, why are you saying that's a blessing? It's like, now, after everything that the Speed Force puts you through, all the loss, all the death, all that pain, the pain of basically having the weight of the world on your shoulders, now you can have a good, normal life. We can just raise a family and stuff like that. And he was like, are you serious? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, why are you saying that? And I think it's because in my mind, I'm like, because you want Barry to walk away from this whole speedster thing. You wanted him to walk away from being the Flash, because if he's no longer the Flash, he can't stop whatever it is that her and Eva have planned. Because there was that point earlier in an episode when Eva saw, she was showing Iris like, wait, because I think for one, she probably Eva got a little nervous seeing that there was another speedster around. Like, okay, the Flash is one thing, but like, wait, there's another speedster, your half brother. Oh crap! But it's like, okay, now knowing that, because I'm sure whatever fake Iris knows, Eva knows. So it's a thing of like, now she knows that like, oh, Barry's powers are dwindling. It's like, oh, it's good, because this way you won't. So it's like, I'm curious like what they're up to, because I'm assuming whatever it is, they were worried the Flash would get in the way. I guess that's why maybe fake Iris was actually hoping to kind of create a situation where she could either manipulate Barry to get him out of the way, or was planning on finding some route to get him out of the way herself. I mean, this might even present an opportunity the moment his power is gone, then you remove him from the equation. That might be an angle to this. We'll ultimately kind of have to wait and see on that. But especially because Iris is like, yeah, Barry's my lightning rod. He said that I'm his lightning rod and he'll find me anywhere. And I think for Ava, maybe that kind of submits some stuff in your mind of like, yeah, I got to make sure he never finds out that you're, because it might compromise things. But she says like, oh, like, hopefully he won't forget you, because it's like, oh, her husband, like he would come to the mirror all that time, but then it's like, and she's like, and Iris is like, did he forget that you were in here or something? And but what's interesting though, it seems like Eva kind of has glitches, and it doesn't. At first, I was wondering if that was something she did on purpose, but it's like no, because like she starts glitching, she starts like running through all like the time she's been there, like years, months, date, stuff like that, and then the thing is, fake Iris starts reacting in the same way. So I think Eva isn't 100% there, both in a way of, maybe it kind of calls like whatever she is, whatever she is, like power-wise, and, what's happened to her, plus being trapped there for so long, it might have broken her psyche. So there might definitely be two sides, or there's definitely like a side of her that's trying to do stuff, but I think there might also be like a side of her that's kind of a little glitched or whatever. I'm curious to find out more about that. Another side of this situation is, obviously, Cisco, like I brought up earlier, was working on a means of dealing with Turtle 2, but Nash comes over and he's like, oh, could you help me without my situation? And it's like, oh, obviously, it's kind of messed up because he got pissed at Cisco for not helping him. It's like, oh, my situation is kind of more important. Oh, glad to see that you came back, not caring about other people and not caring about yourself, but caring about other people. Oh, not. It's like, it's actually a little messed up you say that, considering he is trying to help with a situation. It's like, it's kind of messed up you want him to help with your situation, but to be fair, your situation is a little kind of messed up. But regardless, for him, he brings up the whole thing about, like, oh, what if, there are other people, what about other people on this earth? Like, have you, all your travels and everything, have you found if there are other people from other earths up here? And he's like, well, no, because if they were, basically he describes the situation that led to the situation between Beth from Earth 99 and Beth from Earth 1 on Batwoman. Like that situation that was happening to them, he was describing that. What's interesting though is, once again, like it's happened the most on Supergirl, where other people from other Earths, like the other Win, Toyman, but I guess because I guess they weren't around each other long enough for that to really matter. Plus, I guess it's a whole situation of like, well, they're also like, it's Win from a different Earth, and there's also Win who's from a different, like he's living in the future now, so I think it created that little dissonance, so maybe it never got an opportunity to catch up to him. But obviously there's the other situation with the other other brainies as well, so, but nevertheless, but he brings up the fact there's a, ghost or whatever, and, it's like, you out of anyone is believing a ghost, but like, Cisco was so preoccupied, so he kind of brushes Nash off. But later on, Caitlin goes like, the fact is, you're kind of distracting yourself with work, because like, it's like you went on all these adventures and stuff like that. And for Cisco, it's like he kind of snapped at Nash, because for him, it's like, despite everything, despite all the adventuring he did and stuff like that, he didn't figure anything out. He still feels like, I'm back to square one. He thought he kind of figure it out, kind of find himself after all of this, but he didn't. I guess it's still kind of, something he's still in the process of figuring out. So with that all being said and done, though, he goes to try and apologize to Nash, which we see at one point in time, Nash gets attacked by Red Eyes, and you're like, oh, Eobar's like, so what the hell happened there? But it's like, it turns out he ended up possessing Nash's body, and he attacks Cisco, and he's like, oh, it's time to finish where we started, and he tries to vibrate his hand and stab Cisco, but it didn't work. I was like, oh, because the Speed Force is dead. So I was like, which I completely forgot about. We'll get to it in a second, but it doesn't work. But because Cisco immediately goes, right, you don't have your powers because you're in Nash's body. Cecile has showed up in time to help him, because like she could feel all the hatred flowing off of Nash. So they end up bringing this up to Barry, and it's like, I was like, how the hell did you manage that? What's up with those other whales too? Like, I guess they were warned, because Sherlock had warned he's coming, and his eyes turn red, kind of warning that, I guess it was a situation of all their consciousness existed in some shape or form. So there's some form of them still out there, even though their Earths are gone, like there's some consciousness of theirs that's there. So I guess they were all trying to warn him, because he's the only version. Maybe it's like, maybe HR being a pariah kind of tapped him into something, so that, because it's like I said, because no one else is experiencing doppelgangers like that. So I'm assuming it's because of the whole pariah situation. Maybe, maybe being connected to the anti-monitor and monitor like that kind of led to that. Whatever the situation may be. The fact is, well, because also Pariah's whole thing was about, living, with kind of what he had done, hits named Pariah and everything. So it's like, well, those whales are a reminder of like those Earths that are no longer around, the lives that basically. And, it's actually kind of a thing too, when you actually think about, because like, well, they probably, I wonder, it's not going to get brought up, but what about Wally and Jesse? Does he remember Jesse? Well, because only intermediate Team Flash knows about there being other Earths, so Harry and Jesse, but what about Wally? I'm assuming at some point in time they must have gotten to Wally to be like, yo, this is what's up, or let him know about like, oh, this is what, because didn't ask any questions about Crisis, so he had to been informed. So it's like, I guess that was something he kind of had to deal with. Probably they didn't want to, since Jesse hadn't been a part of the story for a while, maybe they just didn't feel the need to kind of circle that back. I don't know. It's still something. I'm just curious. Something kind of flowing through my head, but nevertheless. Once again, we don't know how Eobard managed to do what he did, but the fact is, he's like, oh, I'm here to do what I always do, to kill you. I plan on slicing your throat, and then I'm going to kill your family, and then I'm going to kill your friends. So that's because he's like, I'll get out of here, and I will, because he's like, unlike Barry, it's like, oh, your Speed Force is dead. He's like, oh yeah, I felt it. And the fact of the matter is, I don't have to worry about that because he made his own Speed Force, so the negative Speed Force. So for him, it's like he doesn't have to be. So I'm wondering how he's going to get around that. I guess it's like, put his consciousness. I don't know how you're going to like. I mean, once again, we haven't seen Eobard since season 5's finale, which is where we got introduced to. Well, season 5 we got introduced to his negative Speed Force and everything. But I'm curious, like, how he plans on managing, like, because we don't know what happened to him between then and Crisis, Maybe the reason why he's in the state that he's in right now is because he was off doing something while Crisis was happening, and it kind of tore. Well, because like Jennifer on Black Lightning, she was kind of in between. She was kind of in an in-between space when Crisis happened, when her Earth got wiped out and everything, so she wasn't affected by it. So maybe Eobard was kind of in a similar vein. Whatever the case may be, I'm curious to see how he circumvents that situation. But also, Barry has to bring up the fact that, yeah, I'm without this, the Speed Force is dead, so I'm losing the speed. But they're like, well, maybe we can do something. The Spectre's energy is just energy. Maybe we can re-engineer to kind of deal with it. But Barry's like, rather, Eobard said he made his own Speed Force. What if we make an artificial one for me as well? So I'm like, okay, so that's definitely going to be interesting to see how that ends up progressing. But once again, the counter is running down on what his power, like his speed, and I'm sure just because of, for tension purposes, it's going to end up dying out at the worst possible time, So, but I think there's because it also shows that Barry isn't thinking about walking away, because I think despite everything, it's like this is still something. I still have my speed, so I can still do good with it. So while I still have it, I'm gonna fight tooth and nail to kind of do whatever good I can, until I don't have it anymore, So it's gonna be interesting. But sadly, at the end, we had, because Camilla found out, because at first, like, Iris was so upset when Camilla took a picture. I was like, why? It's like, is a picture going to reveal the real you or something? I was wondering if it's supposed to be like a shapeshifter, a skinwalker from is that what they were called? I forgot what they called in Supernatural, because you catch them on camera, their eyes turn a specific color. I was wondering if it was supposed to be something like that, because even Wally could kind of tell there was something off about Iris, but maybe because he wasn't because of everything that was going on with the Speed Force, he couldn't really fully tell. So maybe that's what that was. But regardless, the fact is that Camilla was looking at the camera and it detected something, and it shows that Iris wasn't Iris, but, and Iris shoots her with the mirror gun. So I'm assuming, I'm wondering what did that ultimately end up doing? What does the mirror gun have to do with all? I'm assuming it has something to do with freeing Eva. Like, I think she naturally actually can't leave the mirror world, so she needs another means of doing it. So I think the mirror gun's supposed to help in that regard. I'm sure with other aspects at play here, but even Wally telling Joe, like, keep an eye on Iris, make sure that she's okay. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see ultimately where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.